Bridget McKenzie joins us from Melbourne this morning. Good to see you. Precious rain. We've seen farmers dancing in their undies, which has been great to see. Does this rain change anything, though, when it comes to the government's response to the drought?
Well, no, it doesn't, Laura, but you're dead right. It's definitely lifted spirits right along the East Coast. We've got children born in these communities who are toddlers now, who've never seen rainfall, and I guess the relief that you saw across social media over the weekend was farming communities and farming families celebrating the fact that, yes, it will rain again. And, you know, we've seen some great falls, 40 mil in Gippsland, which has been drought affected, and, you know, Ford's Bridge, northwest of Burke, got up to 175 mil. So some great falls there. But it has been patchy, and it's devastating to see that so many communities in need haven't got the rain they needed. And one drenching does not break a drought. We know we're in this drought for the long term, and the recovery could take up to 3, 4, 5 years once we do get much needed rain across the system. So it's great to see it. It's lifted spirits, I think, which is important, but there is still much more work to do. We're standing with our farming families. We're assisting their communities when and how they need it, and we're also, as you mentioned in your comments, building for the future and future droughts through our Future Drought Fund.
I've got to ask you about the farm household allowance. There's been a lot of confusion about this. Will any more of farmers and families be kicked off this before the drought breaks?
Yeah, look, let's be clear. I've taken the advice of the independent farmer-led review into farm household allowance and expanded and simplified this payment. It will now be available for 4 out of 10 years. Right now, you can only get it once in your lifetime. And as it's been going for 4 years, we've started to see certain farming families reach the end of their 4-year eligibility, and we've made a commitment to give them a lump sum payment. The legislation that's sitting before the Senate next week will make sure that the Minister can make a rule at any time in the future to make additional support available to those farmers doing it tough.
Okay,
and
so
we as a government have made that clear,
just to be
that
clear,
we're prepared to do that for as long as needed.
Okay, so this legislation, just to be clear, gives the Minister in charge a bit of leeway, and that being David Littleproud, who said that he's not going to kick anyone off the farm household allowance. So what happens then? You get to your 4 years, you get a lump sum payment, and if the drought does continue, David Littleproud can then say, we'll give you another payment and perhaps another one after that.
So I'm the Minister responsible for farm
Bridget
household
McKenzie.
allowance. No, David's in charge of our drought response, and he's been doing an amazing job you know, garnering a whole of government response. So the farm household allowance sits within my area of portfolio responsibility. So we're initiating a whole raft of simplification and expansion of the eligibility, making it a lot easier for farmers doing it tough to get that much needed fortnightly payment. But in recognition that by the end of this financial year, there will be about 1,760 farmers who are currently on the payment coming to the end of their 4 years. Right. Now, the payment is also paired with individual rural financial counselling. So we find that about 40% of farmers who are on the payment end up exiting the payment before their 4 years are up. They make some changes to their business practice, they succession plan, or they sell up and do other things. But if you are still on the payment and requiring that additional support, the legislation provides for the $13,000 for that immediate lump sum payment for the farmers now up to the end of this financial year. And there is also a rule within the legislation that at any time into the future, when I assess the needs of our farming families, that I can make additional support available to them. And that really just reflects our government's commitment to not just set and forget when it comes to our drought support for our farming families and their communities, but to continually assess the situation and respond as needed. So, and I commit to doing that, as does the PM, as does David Littleproud, and indeed our entire government.
So it means if more is required, you don't have to go back to Cabinet.
Absolutely.
You don't have to go back to the Parliament each time to ask permission. Okay, just to be clear.
And I think we need that sort of flexibility, because sometimes people can play politics with the drought and our drought response. We want to get that that support out to farmers as quickly as possible. This legislation before the Senate next week will allow us to do that.
In the last fortnight as well, the Nationals endorsed a policy within its party room which required, or at least asked, which would go to Cabinet, an extra $1.3 billion to be spent on drought relief. It included beefing up these payments that go to communities. It's a substantial amount of money. Is that likely to be approved by Cabinet? Is that what is being discussed today?
Well, I think what you see from the National Party MPs and senators day in, day out is people that live in regional Australia and over our 100-year history have seen many droughts like this one and stood with our communities and industries as we've come out of it, is our willingness to support our farmers and their communities to get through the drought. I'm confident that the discussions that Cabinet will have over coming period and that our next wave of drought support will give the outcomes that National Party MPs and senators want to see, which is substantial support for our farming families and our industries.
Is that what you're asking for, though?
Well, Laura, I'm not going to outline what Cabinet has been talking about and discussing at all. No, but that was outlined
in the Nationals Party room, wasn't it?
Well, I wasn't at that particular meeting. Senate estimates were on, so we were busy doing other things. So I'm confident that the National Party MPs and senators will continue to fight for our communities and their long-term support that they'll need to get back on their feet, and so does our government.
Now, there's been some complaints about your leadership from within the party. What is this all about? Were these tantrums from men in your party who didn't get what they want, or do you need to look at processes?
Well, I think I can be confident that I get up every day wanting to make sure that I can do my very best to deliver for rural and regional Australians. That's my job as a National Party senator, as the deputy leader and as Agriculture Minister, and I take that very, very seriously, as does all of our party room. We're interested in outcomes, and I can tell you what those that live out in the country don't want to see. It's bickering and inside backbiting. So they want us to just get on with the job. That's what we're paid to do. It's why we got involved in politics, to make a difference for our communities. And that's the approach I take to my job, and it's the approach that the vast majority of National Party MPs and senators take to their job too.
And has there been bickering and backbiting?
Well, I'm, just getting on with the job, Laura. I'm getting the FHA legislation in front of the Senate next week. We're debating that, working in our communities for the drought response, looking at new market opportunities for agriculture across the world. So I'm busy getting on with the job, and I suggest to National Party MPs and senators that they get on with the job, because that's the very least we can do for the rural and regional Australians that sent us to Canberra.